Okay, well, welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming to the Michigan Marketing Minds event. My name is Alyssa Steiner, and I'm the events manager for Ann Arbor Spark. Spark is a supporter of high-tech business and innovation in the Ann Arbor area. If you like tonight's event, you can check out more Michigan Marketing Minds events and other entrepreneur workshops like this at our website, annarborusa.org, and by signing up for our newsletters to stay informed. The event tonight is being live streamed by Russell Video, and if you're viewing online, please feel free to type in any questions. If you're in the room, please use the microphone. Everybody in the room might be able to hear you, but the people who are online or at home definitely cannot. So there is a mic in the back of the room, and we would appreciate it if you would use that. So please silence your cell phones, and thank you for coming. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Michelle Massey Barnes.
Hi, I'm Michelle Massey Barnes. I wanted to thank you for coming tonight too. It is a nice small group, but I see that we don't have anyone that wants to sit in the front row. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I learned about this group and my involvement and introduce the overall marketing concept that we're going to talk about tonight. I love technology. I especially love technology when it helps make people's lives better. But because of what I'm doing now, a lot of people don't realize that I love technology. So I want to tell you how this all comes together. I worked at an internet software company for 9 years. This was back in the day when we actually had to say that it was an internet software company because most of software was not deployed via the internet. Not so much anymore. But I worked there. It was my first career out of graduate school. I was out on the coast. I finished a master's degree in comparative religion and human development and psychology out at Harvard. And I worked with just great people, adolescent girls. I did program development for at-risk youth. I worked with families who were moving out of homelessness into permanent housing. How does that relate to internet marketing, right? And how does that relate to software? So what happened was I was offered a job back in Michigan, which is where I grew up, accepted the job. 6 weeks later, I found out that the state of Michigan wasn't going to transfer any of my graduate credits back to Michigan. I was uncertifiable in my home state, which was a problem considering I was now pretty rooted here. This is where my family was at, and I was married, and this is where we were planning on staying. So I needed a new plan. I found this job at a software company working with substance abuse clients that had agencies that were managing Medicaid and block grant dollars, and they needed customized software to help them with those business objectives of theirs. I was a great fit for that particular company because I knew how to work with clients. I knew how to listen. I knew how to listen to clients that weren't happy, and it turns out that when I started this company, most of the clients weren't happy. I knew how to listen to clients when they were having uncomfortable conversations, tense moments, even when the answer was no. So that was a great skill to have. I hope that you are listening to your clients, and if you're not, I'm glad that you're here tonight because you probably should start listening to your clients. I'm going to talk about that a lot more when I get to my part of the panel discussion. But before I get there, I want to introduce the overall concept that we're going to work with. So this is the marketing bullseye, the way that we're going to work with it tonight. Ross designed this one. He designed the graphic. I think it looks great. And thank you for sharing it, Ross. So the goal of this bullseye is to move the people who are on the outer rings through to the center of the circle. The outer ring, they're the people who are unaware. They don't even know that you or your business exists. It is really hard to sell something to someone if they don't even know that you're there. So the first thing you want to do is to make your unawares aware. Once they're aware, you need to help them have an intent to work with you, an intent to purchase from you, an intent to become your client, right? You can't leave them at intent, though. If they just have an intent, they might take a year to finally decide to go ahead and work with you or to buy from you. So in order to get clients, we need to make sure that we take our intents to closed. So it's a cycle. It's a loop where you can move people from the outside in. And ideally, each stage of your marketing is going to look a little bit different depending on which stage your clients are at and where you're hitting in that target. Makes sense, right? So we're going to tell you stories about how we have put together marketing information, how we've put together marketing campaigns to get people all the way from the outside to the inside. That sounds great, right? We don't want to just tell you stories, though. We also want to give you some takeaways, some things that you can take with you, even implement tonight, some real jewels, so you can take some of these ideas and make them really solid and make them work for you and your businesses. Ross is going to take us all the way through from the outside to the center. Catherine's then going to go back and focus on the outside rings, and then I will come back and focus on the inside, the center ring. Okay, so Ross is going to present first, and I want to just give him a formal introduction. He's been designing websites professionally for over 15 years. He brings a unique and comprehensive view to design. It's shaped by a lifelong love for fine arts and his education in technology, business, and social science. We have this liberal arts connection going. I love it. His diverse background brings insight into all aspects of design, including practicality, business implications, and the psychology of how people interact with computers. He's a partner at 3.7 Designs, which is a web and graphic design agency. He's CEO of High Orbit Plugins, a WordPress software company, and he teaches at Michigan State University. So Ross, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project that my firm has been working on for about a year now. And it's selling a digital good that we created. And kind of we were faced with this classic marketing problem of we created and released a piece of software that nobody knew existed and potentially didn't even know that they needed. It was kind of a spin on a classic project management tool. And how did we get people aware that this is the type of tool that they might be useful or they might find useful, and then how do we actually get them to purchase? And throughout it, kind of the approach I'm going to take is maybe describing a little bit about the background, and then at each stage some things that you might want to consider when trying to move people from an outer ring closer to the center. And then some of the things that we did that we found successful, kind of, proof is in the pudding sort of thing. So this all started in 2010. My design firm, 3.7 Designs, founded in like 2005. And we were sitting down with a client in 2010, and we were talking about how the project would progress and how they would know what was going on and that sort of thing. And we're talking about milestones and dates, and the clients kind of casually mentioned, oh, why don't you just send us an email with a thermometer saying what percentage complete you're at, kind of the whole donation thermometer. You can kind of think of that visual analogy where as you donate more money, you get closer to your goal. And it kind of struck me that this was a brilliant idea, that there was some sort of percentage completion to a project, and that's really what the client wanted to know. They didn't necessarily care about specific milestones of what we were doing, and they didn't want to have to track their calendar to see when certain things would happen. They just wanted a quick update as far as how far are we in the project. And this really addressed an issue that we often had where we'd often get people calling and emailing asking, where are we at? No matter how well we tried to document what was going to happen when, inevitably these questions would come up. And they were a problem for several reasons. One, it took time out of our client's day. This means that they were thinking about it. It kind of occupied their mind space. They're bothered enough where they felt like they had to take action. And then it took time out of our day, so we were less productive. We had to spend time kind of responding and describing these things, even though we had tried to be proactive in the first place. So I thought this simple idea of, some easy way to send our clients a short description or a short visual indicator of how far in the project we are would be a great tool. And I started off by just creating a static web page version where I could go in and manually edit the HTML, which would adjust a progress bar from 0 to 100%, which we would then send once per week just to kind of give the client a quick update. Which then I realized that took some time in itself and decided to make a plugin for the WordPress platform. How many people here know or are familiar with WordPress? Quick show of hands. So just about everybody. Okay, so for anybody who isn't, it's just a content management system that's powers like 20% of the internet, so it's fairly popular. So I wanted a way to make this easier, so I created this plugin called Project Status. And essentially all I did was make it easier for me to spin up a page that had a project's information and a visual indicator that I could then adjust without having to edit files and upload them and that sort of thing, which I released for free on the WordPress repository, where there's some, 15 to 20,000 plugins for free. And the only thing that I wanted out of it, I had a little donate link saying, buy me some beer if you want me to update this. And to my surprise, every once in a while, people would send me 15 to 20 bucks, which I would spend on beer. And interestingly enough, a few years later, I came back, the kind of got away from me. I wasn't making money from it, and saw that there was over 15,000 downloads, and there was quite a few people who were still continuing to use it, and thought that this might be a market opportunity. For those of you who don't know, the premium WordPress plugin market is a multi-million-dollar industry. There's million-dollar businesses that just sell add-ons to WordPress. So it seemed like a good market to get into. So in 2014, we created a premium version called Project Panorama, which was the same essential idea, except kind of upgraded, more full-featured. Rather than one single progress bar, you could also document what phases you're in, individual tasks, task completion, and then kind of weight those items so that as you're completing the project, it would automatically update and tell you how far along in the project you are, which is kind of another issue that we often ran into is, we're doing all these different tasks, and other than tracking our hours compared to our total estimated number of hours, it's hard to really quantify where you are in the project. So this made it a lot easier. It made it so that even internally we could see, okay, we're about 75% done, but we're only 50% through our timeline, so we're actually ahead of time. We spent about 4 months working on it and released it actually on my birthday in 2014. And we were faced with a problem that a lot of people in business are faced with. Almost the entire market was unaware. Nobody knew that this plugin existed. And those who might be our customers didn't even know that this type of tool existed. The difference between what we created and kind of your typical project management tool is really focused on assigning tasks and delegation. And this really isn't what we were focusing on. If you think about like Basecamp or Apsana or I think even Microsoft Project, a lot of these tools, they're all about internal communication of what needs to be done and when, which works fine because usually you have a project manager, you have a team, you have status meetings, that sort of thing. So you don't need a visualization. This was more of a communication tool where you're communicating to your client what's going on. They don't need to know the nitty-gritty. They just need to know that things are progressing. This is what's been done. This is what's going to happen next. Are we ahead or behind? So not only did nobody know we existed, we had a tool that nobody even knew if they needed or not. So potentially we had to get them aware and then figure out once they were aware, how do we make them want to buy? And then once they wanted to buy, how do we actually make them buy? So this is kind of your classic sales funnel. It's described in a lot of different ways. Also, kind of a very common one is attention, interest, desire, action, satisfy. This is another labeling of the sales funnel that's been around a long time. But I like to think of it from kind of the customer standpoint, like what questions are they asking themselves? And that can be described as, are you talking to me? Kind of the unaware. And then, why are you talking to me? This is where they become aware and you're trying to make them interested. That's a good idea, but do I really need it? This is when they're moving towards closing. And then, what do I have to do to get it? This is actually kind of the final steps behind closing. So the first thing we had to do, and potentially the most daunting, is try and reach out to a market that had no idea we existed and let them know that we exist. And kind of starting from scratch, it seems like sometimes it's hard to know even where to start. And there's a lot of talk about new media and about how it lets you focus, and it's kind of the anti-shotgun approach for the traditional media where you're just shooting stuff everywhere and hoping it hits somebody. And I think a lot of times when people talk about that, they kind of miss the idea that it's still okay to do some scattering. You can have kind of more focused scattering. So, or maybe you're not doing the shotgun approach where you're just blasting out media to anybody not sure if it's focused or not. You can kind of do more skeet shooting where you know that there's kind of a burst that's going out, and maybe it's not super targeted, but it's targeted enough. The idea being, if you consider this fishing, cast a lot of lines, because each place that you appear is an opportunity to catch somebody. And there's also a lot of value in repetition, because the more often that somebody sees you, the more important you see, or you've seen. This is kind of a psychological thing where the more times something is impressed or impressions that you get about something, the more important we think it is. And this is kind of branding 101 also. So if somebody sees you mentioned in 4 or 5 different places, maybe that first time they'd ignore you, but that 5th time it seems important enough where they'd actually click through and see more. And then you also want to figure out and think about where you want to drive people, because once you do have their attention and you're going to try and get them to that next stage, you want that to be just as targeted as your messaging. So some of the things we did a whole lot of different things. We pitched a lot of the industry bloggers, so there's a lot of people who blog about WordPress and even project management in general. We paid for announcement posts, so we found a whole bunch of different places that just talked about WordPress. Some of them would take a small fee, and you could actually write up an announcement saying, hey, we released this plugin. So we did that. There's conferences that go around all around the world, actually, for WordPress called WordCamps. Any of those that seemed affordable, we'd spend a little bit of money to get listed there. There's directories that we got put in. We wrote our own blog posts. We went to local meetups. We did some search engine advertising. We did some social media advertising. So all these different little things, none of them were too expensive. I think at most we might have spent $250 to $500 for any individual thing. But because there was such a big scatter approach, all of a sudden lots of people were seeing discussion about this plugin in a lot of different places. So that did a pretty good job of driving people to our website. So they've become aware. Now at this point, we had to do something to try and actually make them interested. And this is where you're kind of working with messaging and visuals, especially when it comes to something digital with a website. I think a lot of this still works with other forms of media. You're going to have to make some decisions about what do you want to communicate, what sort of value are you trying to propose, and then how do you get people excited and interested about purchasing your goods or services. So I think some of the things to keep in mind is thinking about why people buy. So I think we have this tendency to over-logify, if that's a word, kind of our thought process. We tend to think of ourselves as these really logical beings, when in actuality, a lot of the times when we purchase things, it's an emotional decision first, which we then later justify using logic. Think about the last really important thing you purchased. Ultimately, it came down to what felt right. Now, you might have justified that with a lot of logic, a lot of the features and benefits, but ultimately, it was an emotional decision. So you really need to appeal to emotions rather than trying to appeal to people's logic centers. Also, you're going to have some instincts about what messaging and imagery is going to resonate with your audience, and those are probably going to be partially right. There's a huge tendency to assume that our audience is just like us, and when in actuality that's not the case. And it's really hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and that's okay, because there are ways to try and figure out what is going to be the best messaging in terms of language and visuals, and that's asking people. I think that's a good start. If you can get a hold of some of your potential customers and talking to them about what are their pain points, or does this sound good to you? But even better, in my opinion, would be testing. So especially on the web, testing different messaging is really, really easy these days. Google has a great tool. There's a lot of great tools out there that let you test different headlines, different images, and see what do people respond better to. Potentially, the problem with asking people is you might not get a totally correct response. And this isn't necessarily that people want or are intentionally lying to you. It's sometimes they don't even know their own motivations, or you put them in a situation saying, if you read this, would you be interested enough to purchase? And they might say yes, when in actuality, when put in that position, they might not. It's hard to really kind of put yourself accurately in that position. Some of the other things that can really help, a sense of urgency. It's kind of a classic thing. We worked a lot with price points. There's a lot of psychology to pricing, how you even display pricing, that we found dramatic differences in conversion rates. Just doing small things like removing the period and double zeros after the sales price, or shrinking the size of the dollar sign. These things made significant improvements. Conveying trust. There's a lot of really powerful ways that you can communicate trust. We tend to believe people who are trustworthy. This is why uniforms work, which could be, customer logos, testimonials, a signal that you have an SSL certificate, so you're not going to steal their information, a privacy policy. We use the WordPress logo, that sort of thing. So some of the things that we tried first, my thought was, this is a great tool for saving time and reducing interruptions. So some of our first messaging was keep your clients happy and minimize interruptions. This was, what we built the tool for ourselves, hoping that it would solve this problem. Now, it turns out not that many people found that all that compelling, which we then switched to keep your clients happy and save time, thinking again, this idea of happiness, keeping your clients happy, that'll keep you happy, saving time. Doesn't that sound great? But ultimately what seemed to work the best was impress your clients, save time, and bill more. So I think the two pieces, impress your clients and bill more, those out of this current headline that seems to be working the best, impressing your clients, looking good. I think overall that's the message that seems to work the best, because people see this as a tool that they can then show their clients, and it makes them look good. It makes them look better. It's almost like a status thing. And then bill more, making more money. So it kind of really ties to two emotionally heavy things. Some of the other things we did that really seemed to work, using testimonials. This is a very simple and easy thing to do on a website. We started just by getting one from my wife, which was really easy to get. And then as we got some clients, just asking them to provide some information. And the more you can do to kind of legitimize the testimonials, the better. Sometimes it's hard to get photos, but photos work really well. If it's somebody that's well known, like obviously, the testimonials here on the wall, if these are people that that gives them a lot more strength. In our case, we couldn't get photos, but at least we got links to websites where people could see these are actual people who purchased and they're running a business and they found this tool useful. And we also played around with a lot of different imagery. Some of the things we tried to start was kind of these lifestyle photos of people in business and, clients looking happy and that sort of thing. And to our surprise, just shots of the project, of the actual tool seemed to work best. And there's probably a couple different reasons. Maybe it gave people a better idea of what this actually was. They could actually visualize it. But also, I think it can kind of put in their mind what their clients might see. And if it looks impressive to them, then their clients would be impressed by it, and therefore it makes them look better. So between all those different things, you're going to get to a point where people are interested enough and it's time for them to actually make the purchase. Now, it sounds like this should be really simple, like people are ready to buy, why don't they just buy? But how you actually go about buying or purchasing might sound really obvious to you, but it might not be obvious to the people who are potentially interested in your goods and services. I think a good example, for our service-based company, it's not like you can just go to our website and hit add to cart and purchase, because we need to talk a really long time before we can even give you a price. So for a long time, I just kind of assumed that when people want to purchase our goods and services, they know to contact us and we'll go from there. But it's really not that obvious to everybody else. As soon as we put like a request a quote button on, we started getting a lot more contact, because that makes it much more obvious. What do you do next? You request a quote and then we can go from there. Where just a contact button, you have to kind of sit and think about, what do I need to do next? And the moment that you make people sit and think about what they need to be doing next, you're going to actually lose some people. The more effort that's required to get to the next step, the more people are going to drop off. So some of the things you can do to really try and maximize the amount of people who become interested to actually purchasing are minimize choices. So making a decision takes mental effort. This is called ego depletion, and it's basically the more decisions you have to make, the more mental effort it takes, and eventually you get to a point where you don't want to make any decisions at all. So the fewer decisions you have to make, and the simpler the decisions, the less ego depletion will occur. So if a decision has to be made, try and make it a yes or no decision. I either want A or B, or I want A or not, or simplify it as much as possible. Make sure everything is painfully obvious. What do you do next? That next step should always be painfully obvious. It might be obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everyone else. For example, if they should contact you, how should they do so? Are they going to call you? Are they going to send an email? That button should always be right in front of them. If they can purchase directly, don't make them hunt for it. This is something we struggle with a lot of times in our service-based business, is this idea that redundancy is bad. But in actuality, redundancy works really well. So if there's something you want people to do, like contact you or add to cart, that button that says contact me or add to cart should be everywhere. That's okay. It's not going to upset anybody. It'll just be there when they need to use it. And then make it feel safe. Things like privacy policy, terms and conditions, security icons, these sort of things. These give people a nice, warm, and fuzzy feeling. And it's just one less barrier to prevent them from purchasing. And anywhere you can reduce steps and effort is going to go a long way. So some of the things we did, small things like adding that little lock icon, even though people could look up at the address bar and see that it was a secure connection, adding that lock icon made a big difference. Adding the credit card logos made a big difference. It's something recognizable. We use and accept major credit cards. Things like having obvious places that we have support. So if you purchase this, if you have an issue, we can help you out. So really, at this point, you're just trying to get out of their way. You're trying to make it as easy as possible. Minimizing choices to close, minimize steps required. If you have a form field, only have a form field required if you absolutely need it. It's best not to have them. I think a good example is when we first released the software, if you purchased it once, you kind of have an unlimited license where you could get upgrades for the rest of the time, essentially. But we still had a renew here link on the form, and that actually stopped some people because they had to stop and think about, well, I thought this was unlimited. Why is there this whole renew form? So just removing that made a big difference. And another thing we did is, clicking the buy button, rather than have it go to a cart, then you had to click again to go to checkout, and went straight to checkout. So we kind of removed that intermediate step. And then kind of unrelated, but kind of going back to the attention, interest, desire, action, satisfy, make sure that you actually deliver on your promises. I think that's a big part of marketing, that there should be consistency between what you're promising and what people actually get. That's all I got.
Thank you, Ross. So now that you know what the bullseye looks like and how people move through it, how prospective clients move through it, we're going to go back to the outer edges and hear some stories from those rings. So Catherine is up next, and Catherine Tita Burkle has been involved in content strategy, technical, and marketing writing for more decades than she cares to admit. She recently returned from living in Germany, where she worked as both an interpreter in the automotive industry and remotely co-authored a book for Q on internet marketing. She now runs her one-woman Ann Arbor shop doing project management, user experience, content strategy, as well as technical and marketing writing for primarily business-to-business clients.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a travel anecdote, and then we'll go back to the real world. While I was living in Germany with my German ex-husband and raising our two bilingual kids, we had quite a few adventures in Europe as we traveled around and did things on vacation and whatnot. And one of the most fascinating ones to me was this story that I'm going to walk you through right now, because it just hit home some of those outer rings and just crystallized. It was one of those moments where you go, exactly. We were on vacation in northern Italy, and we stumbled across this little cute town, and I'm going to show you on the map roughly where we were. When you drive from northern Italy through Austria back into Germany to go home, you get close to the Austrian border, where they speak German, of course, and there's this little province or state where everybody speaks German and Italian. And this whole region was fascinating to us because it's bicultural, bilingual. It's just been that way from the dawn of time. It's just kind of a blended region, and probably the border fluctuated over the centuries. It's Austrian, it's Italian, it's whatever, but it was just smashed together, these two cultures. And the languages. All the signs were in both languages, the highway signs, the street signs, everywhere everybody spoke two languages. It was just fascinating to me because I am Italian American. Growing up here in the States, I picked up Italian in the 90s and went to visit my, long lost relatives kind of a thing, and visited my dad's cousins, and took 2 trips in the 90s and crash coursed my way through Italian, and managed to get by pretty well, to speak to my cousins and whatnot. And so while we were on vacation, my German, now former husband, but at the time husband, had taken a little bit of Italian, and he really wanted to try his Italian out all throughout this couple of week vacation over the holidays. And so I would let him, because he was very eager. He knew French. He'd, gone to France for one of his degrees, and he was fluent in French, so Italian shouldn't be that hard to pick up because they're both Romance languages. And so he would step up to the grocery store and make an order, and the person was like, I don't get what you're saying. I don't get what you're saying. And finally he would say, okay, Catherine, rescue me. So I'd step up and say a few words, and he's like, how did you know that? I'm like, I just do, So that was how the whole vacation was kind of playing out. He wanted to test his language skills, his Italian skills, and I let him and then would rescue him. So we're in this little area, which is bilingual. So he's a German guy, fluent in German, obviously, but he still wanted to use his Italian. So fine, dear, that's not a problem. And so you can see this little photo is an example of, Casa dello Strudel. That's House of Strudel. It's like you can't get more mixed culture than that restaurant sign. And again, Autobahn, Autostrada. That's freeway, or highway. The town that the story is coming from is the town of Bressanone in Italian, but it's called Brixen in German. And it was just one of these cute little towns, and we decided to stop off for lunch and wander around, let the kids stretch their legs, do that whole, make a pit stop kind of a thing on the way back in to Austria to go home to Germany. So we decided to have pizza for lunch. So our 2 young kids, bilingual, they spoke German with their dad and English with me, and he and I spoke English with each other because we met here in the States. And we walk in there, and it's a crowded lunch kind of a place. And the woman there, like everybody there that worked in the public service industry in that city, had probably grown up in that town, or at least that region, was fluent in both German and Italian. And because it was a little cute tourist town, most of those people spoke English. If you worked in a shop or a restaurant, you were going to speak English as well. So we had many languages to fall back on here. But he wanted to try his Italian, so of course this is what we were doing, is letting him try his Italian. But we were also trying to manage a hungry family at the same time. So he's talking to me, what do you want? He wants to place the order in Italian, so he's got the person behind the counter kind of waiting. And it's like those pizza places we have here where you just order the warm slices are ready. You just tell them what you want, and you get a paper plate full of pizza, and you go off and stand at the bar stool at the counter off to the side and stand and eat. It's not a fancy restaurant by any means. So he's got her kind of holding, and she's, because of the city we're in, she's fluent in German, fluent in Italian, and probably knows enough English to do her job. So he's asking me in English, what do you want? I tell him, and then he turns to the kids, speaks to them in German, finds out what they want for lunch, and they answer him in German, of course. And then he turns to her and starts to stumble his way through Italian to place this order. And she's not getting it because he's using the German word for mushrooms because he doesn't know the Italian word, but he's, it's just mixing. And it's a noisy kind of a, the silverware is clanging kind of a restaurant. So she's just not getting it. And he's kind of struggling, and he's not quite frustrated enough to call for me, but I'm just watching this. She's trying to grasp it. It's partly a hearing thing. She could hear us speaking English. She could hear him speaking German with the kids. And it was at the point where she's like, okay, I think they want a slice of pepperoni, but I don't really know. And he just turned to me, and so I stepped in perfect Italian and said, we want this and this and this and this and this. And she's like, okay, nodded, got it, not a problem. And at that point, she started processing the order. And then she said, chi si persone, which, if you're not fluent in Italian, basically means, who are you people? Because we could speak all three languages that she knew. And the average person walking through there speaks one of the three languages, but not as a family speaking all three. And she just could not fathom how that would be. So then I had to explain in my mostly broken Italian that I'm Italian American, so I know Italian, but then I met this guy and he's German, and then we're raising our kids and they're bilingual and we live in Germany, and kind of the whole backstory, life story of why the heck we were there on vacation, but all speaking all these languages. And she just was kind of blown away that she could understand enough of what we were saying, in the noisy restaurant. So, but this crystallized it for me, the outer rings that we're talking about today. And it basically, the things you need to think about are the lessons learned are who's your audience? If you're trying to formulate your marketing message and present your pizza order to the person behind the counter, who is that person? Are they trilingual? Are they working in a noisy restaurant? Are they trying to grasp what you're saying? Are they able to? What's going on there? What is that person's background? What's their demographic background? Are they? She was extremely patient to a point. You don't want to frustrate, obviously, your potential customers. But who are you talking to? What is the makeup of the audience? Do your user research, find out who those people really are. And you also have to get organized on your end, which we were absolutely not. What is your message? What is your pizza order? We had kids who were hungry but couldn't really read the menu and articulate what they wanted and so on. You have to be organized and assimilate your stuff to get your core message together. And the other thing you need to do is figure out what language you're going to speak. And by this, in this example, I literally mean which language, English, Italian, or German. But obviously in marketing, I mean, what language? What are the words? What terminology resonates with your folks? And ultimately, we're talking about the context of that message to that audience with the language that you choose. That is going to make or break your success with that person. Are they going to be unaware, aware, and interested enough to move into the phase of intent or not? So all of those things work together to create context. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how placing your pizza order kind of also relates to the real world. This project I'm going to describe was back in the year 2000, in the .com era. There was an internet startup company project I was working on where the website was going to be a gift certificate, online gift certificate ordering system for shopping malls. So, for example, you've got Briarwood, which is one of a chain of malls, and every store in Briarwood, you could buy a gift certificate for just the store, for just the mall, for any one of the chain of malls. So if your Aunt Marge is in Texas and she likes to shop at the mall there, that's the sister mall to Briarwood here or whatever, it doesn't really matter. If you where you live, you could still buy a shopping mall gift certificate for Aunt Marge in Texas from wherever your computer is. You don't have to be in Texas, walk over to the mall, buy the gift certificate at the information desk, and put it in the birthday card and mail it off to Aunt Marge. You could just do this online, was the idea. And as a startup company, it had, the website being built, but then there was the whole back end. Who's going to be printing these gift certificates and mailing them? How is this information about the stores and the malls and the chains of malls and all of that information going to get loaded into the database behind this website? That's like a monumental task. And there were salespeople for this business going out and trying to sell mall owners and chains of malls to say, hey, if you load your store information into this database on this website, people could buy gift certificates and they could be sitting anywhere and they could buy gift certificates for your shopping mall and your traffic will increase. Why don't you let us load your data in and give it a whirl? It's not going to cost you anything, and we'll print your gift certificates for you and mail them out. So that's the general business model. And so our task was to look at the person that worked at the startup company that was essentially a clerical person that was probably in the run-up to Christmas going to be working very long hours, 2 shifts, to get all of this load of gift certificates printed and mailed and whatnot. But before they could even do that, they had to load all of the store and mall and mega mall and chain mall information into this database and this website in the first place. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any information in there for you to even pull up the gift certificate possibility for Aunt Marge's mall in Texas. So that was kind of a monumental task, and we were told that they would have a spreadsheet template that the salespeople would be throwing over to their customers after they closed the sale, and this person would get this data back and be somehow uploading it, but really it's a clerical person doing this kind of monumental task without a lot of guidance. So we had to step back and say, who's the audience? What are they doing? What do they know? And what are they going to have incoming, this spreadsheet and this website that needs to be uploaded to? But it was a very complicated process because there were lots of business rules involved in the process. So we decided to take a step back and say, this is not that much different from the way your tax forms are set up. So you've got if situation A, then form A. If situation B, then use form B, and so on and so forth. So we wrote a manual for how to use the website, a printed manual, if you remember paper manuals. We wrote a manual for how to use the website because it was such a paper-based process with these spreadsheets and forms that needed to be filled out. Some of these forms were handed back to the salespeople. Some of these forms were handed to the mall owner or the store owners and whatnot, and all of this information was coming in electronically. There needed to be logos uploaded. I mean, there's a variety of information that needed to get into the website. And so we created the business processes, then created the instructions for how to follow the business processes, and then created the forms themselves that supported the whole business process. And when we put the binder together, we took the forms and used those divided tabs that have pockets in them, so the forms would be in the pocket of the chapter that you needed to follow the business processes. You could just pull out the form, fill it out, and move along with your job. So we were looking at the audience. These are clerical people. They need their hand held. They're not going to be trained except on the job, on the fly training. It's going to be a pretty brutal situation, but they're not going to be PhD physicists. They're going to be, temp workers, basically. So we looked at the audience, and that's how we broke it down. And the core message was that it's okay. We're here to help. We'll walk you through this. It's not as bad, as you think, basically. And the language that we used was very conversational and helpful. It's like, you're on your way. You've got so much done. You just need to do a little bit more. Let's just fill out this form. If you've got this situation, it's going to be just fine. You're nearly finished. Those kinds of conversational cues were built into the project. And ultimately, it was the context of, this poor person. We didn't want the turnover to be skyrocketing on December 20th before the business really could finish that first Christmas season and take off. So that was essentially our way of crafting the message in the right language for that audience, and getting our pizza order right, as opposed to fumbling and bumbling and not making it work out. So that's pretty much it.
A little dance. So thank you. Excuse me, that was great. I want to take us back to this diagram. A lot of people and a lot of businesses will get to the center of the bullseye and then go back out and find more people who are unaware of what they do and start over. And that is one way to do it. But once you have people that you have closed with in the center of the circle, you can stay in the center of the circle and work with that bullseye to continue growing through referrals and through repeat business. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about. That's the primary way that I have grown my business at MMB Imagery. I'm not in the software world anymore, although ironically, my photography studio is embedded inside a tech company, Torrance Learning, which makes a fun and interesting partnership. But I have a contemporary portrait studio where I spend a lot of time listening to my clients. I get to know what it is exactly that they're looking for, so I can come up with a customized solution that really meets their needs. Now, I have a low volume but high touch business. If you are someone that has a exclusively online marketing where you're selling a product, you might have a very high volume business. So instead of thinking about some of the things that I say directly related to your clients, maybe you want to think about them in terms of your vendor relationships or in terms of different relationships that you have as part of your marketing. This is my daughter. She's 7. She loves pink and purple. 90% of the time, her shoes are on the wrong feet, even though we have tried every day to teach her how to put her shoes on the correct feet. She's just one of the most whimsical children that I know. Now, I did not put this slide in here because I wanted you to see how cute she is, even though I think she's really adorable. I put this slide in here because I want to ask you how well you listened to what I just said. I'm wondering if you saw the way that my eyes sparkled when she came up on the screen. I'm wondering if you saw the way that I still do it when I think of her. I take a deep breath and my shoulders relax, my body language shifts. You can just see how in love with her I am. And even though that's an example that's way over here on the spectrum of what we might deal with in our business relationships, your clients and the people that you work with have those same kind of responses when they're passionate about something. When they're telling you what they care about and what they want to know, they will give you those cues. Sometimes their words will contradict the cues. I made a mistake early in my career, in my photography career, where I was photographing a wedding and the bride repeatedly told me that she did not like to be the center of attention. She was extremely nervous about walking down the aisle. She really didn't want any photographs by herself. I made the mistake of thinking that she was my client. She wasn't. Her mom was my client. And her mom was sitting next to her saying, "Oh, she's going to look so beautiful in her dress. Oh, I can't wait to see her with her flowers. I can't wait to see her with her hair done." I ignored the mom. I took 10 pictures of the daughter. The mom wasn't happy. Let's just put it at that. After the wedding, I had to choreograph a reshoot, a session for just the bride. I had her hair redone. I had her bouquet remade. And I did a bridal portrait session of just her so her mom could have the photographs of her daughter that she wanted because I didn't listen to what the mom said. I missed it completely and went with just what the bride said, who wasn't really my primary client. So I don't want that to happen to you. This is a really funny portrait. I don't think that many people would purchase this to put on their wall. But I put this slide in here because this particular family I've gotten to know well, they had this session for their mom who moved to Florida. Their mom misses her kids so much, and she misses her grandkids so much. She misses the way that they are when they're together. It only took 5 seconds of being with this family to know that those two daughters laugh nonstop. This was the mom's favorite photograph in the album. I wouldn't have known that if I wouldn't have listened. This is another great example. I got to know this family well, and I know that they really wanted photographs that captured the personalities of their daughters. I did that listening thing. I really listened to what they said, to what they didn't say. I was fortunate in this situation. They invited me into their home. I got to look at what was on the wall. I could have stopped here. If I would have stopped here, they would have been happy. It's a beautiful picture. They would have liked it. But this is what they wanted. They wanted something that was more contemporary, more personality involved and wrapped up in the image. And that's why they came to me. Because I listened and I was able to get this for them, they loved it. And because they loved it, they've went on to refer other clients to me. They've actually had 2 sessions with me now, so I got that repeat business. If you want to stay in the center of the bullseye and get those repeat clients and be able to ask for referrals, I think it's really important that you don't just do a good job. People expect that you'll do a good job. You need to really go above and beyond. You need to do a great job. You need to do something that is noteworthy, something that they're willing to talk about. And that's when they'll tell other people about it, and that's what makes a referral process in part so organic. There's a lot more you can do to build a formalized referral plan, but in terms of getting people to talk about you, it's doing the unexpected. It's going above and beyond. I've been working on a campaign that I've called my Reconnect campaign, where I have went back and started handwriting notes to many of the clients that I've been out of touch with. So they're going out in stages, and some of these letters went out the middle of the month. And a week later, I was talking to one of the moms who received one of my cards. I was talking to her about our next project. Surprise, surprise. She said to me, "Thank you so much for the note. I can't believe you did that. I keep it on my desk and it helps me stay motivated when work is hard." I mean, that's a success in itself, right? But she goes on to tell me, she says to me, "Michelle, no one does that. No one writes notes but you." Now, if that's true and I'm the only person that's writing notes, I just told you a huge secret, right? And this is a great way that you can differentiate your business. Maybe it's not notes, though. Maybe it's not handwritten notes. Maybe that's not your way. But maybe there's something else that you can do after you listen, after you give them a great experience. I want to encourage you to really think about those things. You're going to have to look at what makes your business special and unique, and how can you add that extra touch. Again, like I said, if you're a high volume business, it's probably not going to make sense for you to do that for every single client. But are there special vendor relationships? I want to tell you another story. I went into a local business that I have it's kind of a hard relationship to explain without telling you who it is, and I don't want to state the name, but I have an ongoing relationship with. I've purchased services from them for a number of years, and my kids are involved in this business too. And I said, I have an idea. Let's do a girls' night out event. And the director, for lack of a better word, we'll call him the director. He said, oh, we've done that before. It doesn't work. It's really hard to get a girls' night to come together. You can't just create a group. We just don't know how to do it. And I said, well, I could create my own group. I've got 10 or 15 people that have told me they want to come here, and I can't individually bring all of those people in by myself. I just can't. I don't have time in my schedule for that. And he said, oh, well, okay, if you want to bring in a group of people, we'll give you a discount. We'll give your friends a discount on their package, and they can get started that way. I was like, that's not what I want. I said, no. I want to build you a system. I mean, of course, I have a good relationship with this person, or you can't say that to just anyone. But I'm like, no. I want to build you a system so you can do this with every Michelle that you have that comes here, so they all bring their groups of friends in. And he was like, oh, it's just too hard to manage. We don't have the software for it. We don't have the back end for it. I just don't know how it could work. But I can give you some money off your initial starter package. And I was like, oh man, you really missed it here. It's not the people that I want to bring that needed the incentive to do it. It was me. And I know this organization well enough that I very well might do it anyway, but I wondered how many other people aren't that closely connected to this community that are walking away that could be converted not just to clients, but to lead generators, connecting them to other groups that are coming right out and saying, I'll do it, but aren't getting reinforced for that behavior. So that's another thing that I wanted to bring up is when you're listening to your clients, if there are some that are saying, if they're putting their hands in the air and they're saying, I want to, my recommendation is find a way to help them do that. And not only find a way to help them do that, thank them for it when they have done that. Because what they're doing is they are keeping your marketing activities right in the center of that bullseye. It's just like one dart is going after another. And it's such a fabulous way to build. It's such a fabulous way to build a community, to grow a business, to build relationships. You already have permission. You already have trust. You're not starting at the very beginning and figuring out what language are we even speaking. But I think as business owners, we miss that opportunity on a regular basis. So there's some things that I have done to help make it easier. I decided some time ago that these handwritten cards really work well for my client base. I have a box of note cards. I order them once a year. I have 4 different designs, and my goal is to get them gone by the end of the year, because I made a deal with myself that if they're not gone, I'll throw them away. And I don't like to throw things away. I'll recycle them, but you know what I mean. So I use them, and that's a goal of mine. They stay in the box with the envelopes, with stamps. Because if I have to go to the post office to get a stamp, just like Ross said, if you have to think about which button to click, it'll get lost along the way. I have 3 young kids. I have enough that confuses me and makes it hard for me to do things. So I keep everything together. So when you start thinking about what you can do that will motivate the people that you work with, I encourage you to think about the whole system. What is your box going to be? Mine's a box because I have a home office and I have a studio office. I need it to be mobile because I don't know where I'll be writing the notes. Sometimes I'm even writing them when I'm in the car waiting to pick kids up from school activities. But think about your box. What can you build that will help you with these touch points? Because they really do make a difference and they really will help your business grow. Thank you. Well, we have time for questions. There is a microphone that Don has, and if you have a question, we would love it if you could please use the microphone, not only so we can hear you, but so that it can be recorded as well.
Ross, can you tell us a little more about the ups and downs of sales, and has it been a straight uphill climb, or have there been dips?
So our initial sales were a lot higher than I expected. I was thinking we'd probably sell a couple licenses per week, so figure 8 to 10 a month. And from the beginning, we got somewhere around 40 to 50 a month. And that's, I would say it's the number of licenses is about the same, but we've increased the prices. So we've had pretty consistent sales. There's certainly been some months that are better than others. And it seems to coincide with seasonalities. December was a really big month, but that was probably because we had like essentially a winter sale, which WordPress plugins do, which I learned this year. And I think there's probably a lot more potential for the sales to go up. We're kind of splitting time between client work and trying to promote the plugin, and actually do very little promotion of the plugin since the initial launch. A lot of it's been word of mouth and people just kind of finding us on search engines. So I would say it's pretty stable. We could probably get about 40 to 60 sales per month. And we might see small variants, maybe 10% one way or the other, depending on the month.
Have you identified who your bullseye customer is?
Yeah, there's a core group that seems to purchase it the most, and it's pretty close to what we predicted. It's people kind of in our situation who have the same need. There are service providers. A lot of them already work on the web, which is why they're using WordPress. So it's a lot of designers, developers, that sort of thing. But, I've been surprised as far as like the breadth of the different types of people who are using it. We have one person who's a roofer and just likes to take pictures of the roof job and post it online so that people can log in and see how much of the roof is being done. Disney, one of the Disney departments, I'm trying to think, is using it. And I'm not exactly sure what, but they did contact us at some point. We had people use it for religious retreats. So it's pretty wild how broad it is. But I'd say the bullseye target are really people kind of in our shoes.
Other questions?
I don't know if it has anything to do with marketing or selling or anything, but my older, this is for Michelle, my older son got married last September, and it was in Nashville, Tennessee, and they hired this photographer, and he had an assistant. And I never even remembered seeing them, meeting them, or anything, and I was the father of the groom. And then after it was done, we saw the pictures, and they were like absolutely awesome. It totally surprised me. How did they do that? And do you have that experience yourself? Do people say like, whoa, where were you? I didn't even see that.
Well, I have a very different business model. I mean, my business model is really built around building relationships. And in part, it's because I don't photograph a lot of events. There are a lot of people that like that kind of, like the spontaneity, the surprise. But I'm not a fly on the wall photographer, if you will. I'm always looking for what it is that the client has already told me that they want to see. I had some extra slides in here in case we needed more or less time. So like this is a slide this is Megan Torrance. This is the tech company that I'm embedded inside of. She told me that she's a great speaker. Like, you've got to know that. She's a dynamic speaker. She's great. I've heard her speak a lot. She told me that she has all these pictures of her presenting where she's making funny faces. Her hands are in front of her face. She doesn't look like she's engaged with the audience at all. She looks bad in a lot of them because when you're talking and someone like takes a still photograph, your face looks funny. One eye is half closed. It's just like no one wants pictures when they're eating either, right? So I knew all this about her. So when I was photographing her presentation, I knew exactly what to look for. I didn't have the luxury of saying, wait, excuse me, stop, can you please do that again? But she knew I was there. And even though she wasn't engaged with me at the moment, it was still a very different model than me coming back and surprising her and saying, guess what? You didn't even know that I was at your presentation, but I was, and here's your photographs. We have a different experience from the very beginning.
Catherine, when you think about the paradigm you gave us in terms of, and one of the things was language, was a great example of the trilingual. How does one think about your customer and the language that they're speaking? Is there a way to, is it doing interviews and actually taking down verbatims to say this is how they describe their need and feeding that back to them? Or what do you do to get at the language question?
That's a great question. Starting with some market research interviews is a great starting point. Sitting down with people, and most companies have a way that they talk about their business, their services, their products, and their products have names. Those names are generally known to their customers, but the language around those names it's a very different way that the customers will talk about something. It solves a different problem for them sometimes. The customer may say, the company may say, we produce handheld diagnostic devices. And the customer may be saying, oh, we plug this thing in, and I like that it's portable, it's mobile, it moves around, and it's got all the drivers and all the connections that I need for all the platforms. So they are articulating the mobility and the fact that it's versatile. But the company may be saying, well, it fits in your hand, it's handheld. That's handheld and mobile are two terms, but it's the perspective taking that you need to think of. So if you're selling handheld diagnostic devices, you might be wanting to say, mobile, versatile diagnostic tools or something along those lines. So it's partly starting out with interviews, and the more interviews you do, the more information you're going to gather. I mean, people are not identical to each other, you may have noticed. So therefore, the language that they use, the background that they have is also not identical, and they're going to use different terminology. But as you talk to more people from different customer relationships, you're going to start seeing some similarities and some more common language. And this really ties back even to SEO, to search engine optimization. You can really say these kinds of terms and these kinds of phrases keep coming up, and we're going to build all of those different possible search terms into our website copy, for example, so that we can hit all potential customers and not just narrow ourselves to the terminology that we use internally as a company, but use our customers and our potential customers' terminology so that we're coming up in search engine results. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing I recommend people doing is testing. I mean, like Ross was saying, just do simple testing, A/B testing, which landing page copy, which is going to get more forms filled out and more emails coming in, more requests, more product information requests. That's really easy to do, to tweak your language, not just in the ads, but also on the site itself. Dig into your analytics, and that's extremely revealing for what terms people are looking for and coming to your site with. I mean, that's getting into the kind of the internet world, but those are the kinds of things, testing and user research, visitor research, demographic.
Great. I'm going to throw something over here to Chris for a second. So with what Catherine has just said, and really part of the theme is listening to the customer and hearing their exact words. In the creative side, how do you take the words and give them some freshness, at the same time have the customer feel like those are the words that they would speak?
Well, I don't know. My experience is often you can try and write well to resonate with the customer, as people have said here and there. But, my technique, as much as they'll allow me to do it, is just sit down and talk with them and interview them and write everything down that they say or record it, because they're the best copywriters. I can't tell you how many times, the few times where I've really gotten those really aha moments, it's what's something that the customer said. Or, you know what I mean? Like when, well, I'll tell a quick story. Back in the late 90s, when I worked for Mechanical Dynamics, we a big part of our customer base was the major automotive companies. We sold them simulation software for their engineering analysis teams. And, everybody then at that time was talking time to market, time to market, time to market. All the big automotive gurus were saying that. We were saying it at all of our, customer events and everything else. And one day, and we really struggled with cutting through at that message. For one thing, because everybody was saying it. All of our competitors were, all of the other companies in the space were saying it. And one day we had the opportunity to sit down for about half the day with, we didn't need it as it turned out, but with this guy named Glenn Whitehead from Chrysler. He was like a VP of engineering or something. And right immediately he said, I am so sick of hearing that time to market thing. He said, what we want to be in our group is smart to market, smarter to market, whatever, some variation of that. And we went, and just the bells just, started going off in our heads. Because he said the real reason we use your software, I mean, sure, time to market, but that's a given. That's like, buying a refrigerator to keep your food cold. The real reason we invest so much in your software is because we want to sleep well at night. We're worried about our designs. We don't want to put a bad design out there. And your software gives us the opportunity to test it, test a design thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. Well, anyway, we were not getting it for the longest time. We put that message out there and everybody got it. We took it to the aerospace market, to the off-highway market, to our people there, and they all just said, that's it. Why haven't you been saying that for the last couple of years? But anyway, as I say, the customers, listening to them, hearing what they say and what's important to them, they write the copy for us. Whenever I get that chance, I always take it.
Excellent. Just before I think our time is coming to a close, if you were to give us a personal challenge, let's make it an encouraging personal challenge, what would that be to us tonight?
Any of us? Me?
All three of you, yes,
Okay.
please.
I would say look at your calendar and take 5 customers to lunch over the next 3 weeks and really listen to what they're saying and get them to talk about their favorite product or service that you sell to them, and learn something new about your own business.
I guess I would say, kind of to Chris's point, challenge your preconceived notions about why your customers do business with you, and consider and think about, is that actually why they're doing business, and try some other messaging to see if that resonates better than your current messaging.
Okay, great. After you take your 5 clients out to lunch, see if you can come up with one very personalized thing that you want to thank them for, and write it in a note and mail it to them and see what kind of response you get.
Yes. Oh, excellent. Yes. So thank you so much to Michelle and Catherine and Ross. This was awesome. We're really glad to be here. It was wonderful to hear the stories and the actual things that you did. And we have those images in our mind, from the look of where I'm at to the pizza, to the beautiful daughter, which we all now love passionately. And, all those images are neat. So if you can now, at your tables, fill in the survey, that will be very helpful for us as we look at topics going forward. And you can give them either to Alyssa, Charlotte, or to myself. Thanks again for being here this evening. and tell a friend about next month. Just as you're filling something out, Paul, could you tell us what next month is?
Oh, sure. Should I go there? Yeah. I thought I'd come up here real quick. This way I have a choice of microphones. I'll use them both. Hi, my name is Paul Koch. I'm with Q Limited here in Ann Arbor. Hi, Mike. Here to invite you to next month's Michigan Marketing Minds, June 9th. Our topic is International Marketing Momentum, getting started. I think this is sort of a first time for M3X to cover this big topic of international marketing. We've got a panel that includes 3 very knowledgeable and helpful individuals, and they're here. They'll tell you about topics such as, for international marketing, such as getting started, some do's and don'ts. I'm sure they'll share some stories about their experiences, resources, and much more. So yeah, I think this will be a great event for individuals that are interested in exploring international opportunities, but I think also just for people that are interested in business in general and all things that make the world go round. So look forward to seeing you